Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing two book reviews, the first being Jane Slayre by Sherry Browning Irwin, and the second being Death of a Schoolgirl by Joanna Campbell Slane. Okay, so before I get going with my thoughts on both of these books, which are both inspired by Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, it's probably best that you have read Jane Eyre. If you haven't read Jane Eyre, you might not want to listen to my review of these books because there's a possibility spoilers from Jane Eyre are going to be popping up throughout this review. So yeah, if you are familiar with Jane Eyre, please proceed. Jane Slayre by Sherry Browning Irwin is a supernatural twist on the classic Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. By day, Jane is a young woman learning to find her way and hold back her feelings for Mr. Rochester, but by night, she is a vampire-slaying killer. So, Jane Slayre by Sherry Browning Irwin. This book is described the literary classic with a blood-sucking twist. So, this book, I think, was released back when there was, the huge surge of popularity with things like Pride and Prejudice and zombies and Sense and Sensibility and sea monsters and whatnot. Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, you get the drift. This book, I gave it 2 stars. And on Goodreads, 2 stars says, it was okay. And that's exactly how I felt about this book. I felt, it was okay. The hard thing about these books that put a supernatural twist on a familiar classic story, the problem is, if you've already read the original story, you know everything that's coming. So it can be a bit difficult getting through these books. It can be a bit plodding. So naturally, I'm going to compare this book to Seth Grahame-Smith's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. The thing is, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, where that succeeded, where this did not succeed, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, it pretty much had zombies on every single page. I mean, sometimes it would have a few pages with no zombies, but for the most part, there was always something relating to the zombie apocalypse. Even if there wasn't necessarily a zombie, there would still be something else, like maybe a ninja or something. The Bennett sisters preparing and becoming ninjas so they can fight the zombie horde that's coming. The problem with Jane Slayre, this is supposed to be Jane Eyre, who is a badass vampire hunter, but there's really no vampires. The vampires are very few and in between. So this book, I was really looking forward to seeing an ass-kicking Jane Eyre. But there would be pages and pages and pages. No supernatural twist. Absolutely no supernatural twist. And it just felt like I was reading Charlotte Bronte's book. And that's the thing with these books. Even though you're going into a silly, cheesy book that's just nothing but fluff, the thing is that's what you're picking this book up for. You're picking it up for the silliness and the cheesiness. And I wasn't picking this book up to reread the book that I had already read. I didn't want to reread Jane Eyre. I wanted to reread Jane Eyre with a supernatural twist, and I didn't really get that often enough. So yeah, like I said, I gave the book 2 stars just because it was okay. That's all it was. The good thing is, I went into this book, I already liked the characters for the most part, because I like the original story and the original characters from Charlotte Bronte's book. So yeah, I had no issues there getting into the story. And I think the book started off promising. It started off very promising because when Jane, as a child, when she goes to Lowood School for Orphans or whatever, Sherry Browning Irwin, she did a really good job there, having a bunch of zombies and I think some vampires. I'm having trouble remembering all the little things that happened at the beginning. But yeah, little Jane Eyre faced a lot of supernatural elements early on in her life that set her up to where she is later by the end of this book. And I also liked the twist that Irwin did with St. John Rivers, because in the original book, everything with the Rivers, I always get a little bored there because I always want Jane to go back to Mr. Rochester. So I actually really ended up liking everything with St. John Rivers because Irwin made him a badass vampire hunter as well. I think this book is actually at its weakest, weirdly enough, with Mr. Rochester. That's really difficult for me to say because in the original book, I love me some Mr. Rochester. Those are easily my favorite parts of the book with him. I think it's this part of the book where Irwin had a very difficult time trying to incorporate anything supernatural. Because like I said, I think the beginning and end of this book do a good job incorporating supernatural creatures. But yeah, everything with Mr. Rochester, nothing much happens in regards to zombies or supernatural things or vampires or whatever. Nothing much even happens. It's this part of the book, the whole middle chunk of this book, that just feels like I'm reading the original story. And even though I am complaining about the whole middle chunk of this book, I do think Irwin does a good job with Bertha Mason and her brother. They're both werewolves, I think is all I'll say. So overall, not quite sure how to recommend this book. I don't really recommend picking it up at all. I only recommend you picking this up if you are looking for something a little silly and cheesy. You don't have to think about it. If you love the original Jane Eyre story and you just want to give this a try, but yeah, nothing really great about this personally. Death of a Schoolgirl by Joanna Campbell Slayre is a sequel to Charlotte Bronte's beloved classic, Jane Eyre. When a strange letter arrives from Adele, Jane and Rochester fear for the girl's safety. Jane travels to London to find out what is going on, and when she arrives at Adele's boarding school, she discovers that one of the students has been murdered. Jane poses as a teacher, and it's up to her to figure out who the murderer is before Adele becomes the next victim. Whew, you guys, Death of a Schoolgirl. Damn. I did not know what to think about this book. I wasn't quite sure if this was going to be good or bad, and I really enjoyed this. I highly recommend picking this book up. As the synopsis said, this is a sequel to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, and this definitely felt like a proper sequel. The things that happen in this book, it was just like, oh, I can easily see these things happening after the events of Jane Eyre. You know, everything in this book felt so natural and believable, and I think Joanna Campbell Slayre did a great job of characterizing the characters that you already previously know and love. Joanna Campbell Slayre perfectly captures everything you love about the original Jane Eyre and just expands upon it, just beautifully. And what Joanna Campbell Slayre does in this book, she makes Jane Eyre this amateur sleuth. And it just seems like such a natural progression for Jane's character. You know, it's such a believable concept that Jane, she's not going to sit around and be a housewife and just clean and take care of her and Rochester's children. You know, she's gonna get up and do things, and I love that she was just an amateur sleuth, and I love that this was a little mystery story. And I also think Joanna Campbell Slayre, not only does she get the characters right, but I think she just gets the overall tone and mood and atmosphere of the original story. You know, I think that carries over wonderfully into this book. And really, all I can say about this book is that I had such a fun time with it. I love that this was a continuation of a book that I already loved. It was so well done, I think. I loved just about everything about it. Plus, the mystery, you know, the murder mystery in here, revolving around Adele and that one of her classmates has been brutally murdered, and just a really fascinating mystery there. Plus, I continue to love the Jane and Mr. Rochester relationship in this. It's not the core of this book, you know, compared to the original book. It's not the core, because this book is very much focused entirely more with Jane herself and her story. But yeah, the moments with Jane and Rochester in this book I absolutely loved and adored. And you know, the thing about the original, they had such an angsty relationship. They had such an angsty relationship, so in this book you really get to see the two of them have a much healthier relationship. So yeah, I highly recommend this book, you guys. It's a worthy successor to Jane Eyre, I think. Just great development, great continuation, and you still love these characters just as much. So that's it for these two book reviews. Let me know your opinions on either of them. If you wish to read either of them, just let me know. And if I had to choose, like I said, I don't recommend Jane Slayre at all. I definitely do recommend Death of a Schoolgirl more than anything. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.